Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and my scythe is sharp and ready to podcast.
And my name is Scott Daly. And wait, what? Why do you need a scythe to podcast?
You'll see.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope everyone having a wonderful Friday evening. I am having a very eventful Friday evening, where a baby was very fussy, but I'm here and I'm ready to talk about some books. I'm sure we know a lot of the folks in chat already, but if you are joining us for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this here monthly book club. Matt, explain the whole thing.
Each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia, and we let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
That is true. Then we meet here on the last Friday of the month and spend a couple of hours discussing the book. We pull slides of interesting moments and lead discussions all about the story. Before we get into what book we're talking about today, let's say hi to people here, Matt. We got John in chat. We got Miss Evil Doom. We got 567. Hello,
Yeah,
hello, hello. Thank you.
welcome. Yep, Bipolaron, Cass, Kirk, David. Welcome everyone. This is good good number. Kirk says I'm a little bit quiet, and that won't
I'm
do at all.
I'm cranking you up.
All right. Tell me if.
Um,
By the way, tell me if Scott cranked me up enough because sometimes I don't get cranked up enough.
Sometimes I like to drown Matt out. This is really the Scott show here. Come on, let's be honest
Yeah, just watch. He turned me down actually.
here. Thank you everyone for coming. I am feeling a little discombobulated about this month for obvious baby related reasons, but I am still looking forward to having a conversation. This is one of those ones that I'm really interested in what everyone else has to say about this book because I am kind of undecided about a lot of what I think this book is saying. Speaking of the book, we should talk about what the book it is.
Sure.
Matt, what book are we doing this month?
Reaper Man by Terry Pratchett, and the summary from Goodreads is as follows: Death has to happen. That's what being alive is all about. You're alive, and then you're dead. It can't just stop happening. But it can, and it has. So, what happens after death is now less of a philosophical question than a question of actual reality. On the disc, as here, they need death. If death doesn't come for you, then what are you supposed to do in the meantime? You can't have the undead wandering around like lost souls. There's no telling what might happen, particularly when they discover that life is only for the living. I don't
Wow.
know if that's a summary, but good try, Goodreads.
It's fun though. I like
Yeah,
it. I
it's
like
fun.
that.
It's witty. It seems like the sort of thing that would be on the dust jacket of this book.
Yeah, yeah. So I think this is my first and only foray into Discworld. This is it right here. So I think I have just a really small scope of what Discworld is and what this whole series is by this book. But as we go through our overall impressions on the book, I want to hear from everyone out there. Have you read a bunch of? Are you a what are what are Terry Pratchett fans called?
Discordian, is that a thing?
Discworld,
No, dis.
Pratchett's, Pratt heads,
Yeah,
the Chets.
Prats.
What
Um,
what did you folks think of this book? Had you read it
yeah,
before? And how much of the Discworld have you read? And what did you think of this book in particular? Matt, what did you think of this book?
yeah. Well, so I think I had read one Discworld Pratchett book in my like middle school era, and I have very very little memory of it. I sort of vaguely remembered it as being what Pratchett does, which is fun dialogue and then also some emotional moments in there. I liked this book. This was a fun read. This was a quick read. Pratchett, like every line of the book, is perfectly engineered to be either funny and charming or emotionally devastating
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. I think you and I might be on the same page that I don't actually understand what is going on thematically in certain regards, or I have like a vague idea in certain ways, but I'm not. I'm very often I'm just like, look, I'm sure we'll figure it out when we talk about it on the podcast, but I don't have a solid feeling about it right now, and that's fine. I don't think that really impacted my enjoyment of the book, although it does leave me kind of wishing that I had grasped thematic thrust a bit better.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing for me is I can see enough, like I can see enough things that pop out that say theme to me, where I'm like starting to get a handle on what I think the book is doing, but not like in any kind of firm, I'm comfortable that this is what the book is saying type of way. But yeah, I mean, my experience with this book was a very unique one. I don't think anyone has quite experienced this book the way I have, in that I read this entire book in one sitting in a hospital waiting for my wife to give birth.
Uh-huh.
And I found it was perfect for me in that I I was stressed out, I was tense, and this book made me laugh. It made me relax. I really really enjoyed it. But yeah, I'm still kind of uncertain as to exactly what it's doing. It is, like I said, my only Discworld book. I think I've read a couple Pratchett, one being Good Omens, which was one of the first books we read for the book club, and I think this is at a very piece with the type of very clever humor that Good Omens had in it as well. I joked to you before we started, and I'm going to repeat this, and only because I know it'll piss off the Sanderson fans in our audience, but I think Pratchett is as clever as Sanderson often sometimes thinks he is in his comedy writing, because this was very very clever, very funny book.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of different levels of funny too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You can. I don't actually know much about Pratchett's biography, but he feels like somebody who must have written for the screen or for the radio at some point.
Mm.
Especially just because so much of this book is just dialogue, 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 like without even any he said, she said in there. It's just like he's kind of expecting you to keep up, which actually
Oh
made it
yeah.
very hard to pull quotes, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure.
Uh,
Yeah, I'll say out front here that Matt handled the entire prep work for the book this month. So thank you, Matt, for stepping up to do that. And yeah, this was not an easy book to do it for sure.
yeah, I mean, I think it'll be okay, but like just to explain what I mean when I say that, like it's very hard to pick out one piece of text that succinctly addresses a specific thing, because the way he writes, it's like that idea will be like threaded in a humorous and oblique way through a 6-page conversation,
Yeah.
which you can't just grab. Like you can, if you grab part of it, then you're just like, I this is just nonsense. I don't know what to do with this. But if you read it in context, obviously it's like clever and fun and makes sense. But yeah, we'll see. We might see some of that as we go through these slides.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like everyone really enjoyed this book, and that makes me happy because I really enjoyed it too. We got some hardcore Discworldians, and then some new people. We have Cass here who hasn't read any Pratchett at all, but really enjoyed this book and legit laughed out loud. David Hunt has read no Pratchett besides Good Omens, so just like us. And yeah, it seems like everyone really likes it. John is
Yeah.
saying yes, this is a very deep book thematically. I felt I figured more of it out on this read than I had before. Well, I hope you can help us, John.
Yeah.
I really, the community aspect of this book club is going to be more key this week than it maybe ever has.
Yeah, John says they've read 25 Discord books, so hopefully that qualifies John to speak authoritatively about what Pratchett is talking about.
Yeah. Do we want to move into it and kind of see if we can
Let's-
unlock the
yeah.
mysteries of Reaper Man?
Let's do it. All right. So the first slide is basically the first passage of the book where we
Mhm.
discuss the Morris dance, which I guess is a metaphor for something. The Morris dance is common to all inhabited worlds in the multiverse. It is danced under blue skies to celebrate the quickening of the soil, and under bare stars because it's springtime, and with any luck, the carbon dioxide will unfreeze again. The imperative is felt by deep sea beings who have never seen the sun, and urban humans whose only connection with the cycle of nature is that their Volvo once ran over a sheep. It is danced innocently by raggedy bearded young mathematicians to an inexpert accordion rendering of Miss Widgery's lodger, and ruthlessly by such as the ninja Morris men of New Ankh, who can do strange and terrible things with a simple handkerchief and a bell, and it is never danced properly, except on the Discworld, which is flat and supported on the backs of 4 elephants, which travel through space on the shell of Great Atuin, the world turtle. And even there, only in one place have they got it right. It's a small village high in the Ramtop Mountains, where the big and simple secret is handed down across the generations. There, the men dance on the first day of spring, backwards and forwards, bells tied under their knees, white shirts flapping. People come and watch. There's an ox roast afterward, and it's generally considered a nice day out for all the family. But that isn't the secret. The secret is the other dance, and that won't happen for a while yet.
So I looked this up because I was really curious, and
Uh huh.
the Morris dance is apparently like a thing that Pratchett loves to throw in his books. Like he references it multiple times throughout several of his books. He's really interested in this dance, which is a real kind of English folk dance, where all these people dress in white and have bells on and move around and dance. Um, I do. I don't know what to say about it other than it's such an interesting way to introduce us to this world. I mean, this is my literally this passage you just pulled is my introduction to Discworld, right? Like this is my entire introduction to Pratchett's universe. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I mean, the the defining instinct of it is a dance that's true in our world, and also they mention Volvos and sheep, so like Great Britain itself.
Yeah.
But then there's this world that is flat on the shell of a turtle, um,
Yeah.
and it sets this really interesting world in which like it's constantly making references to stuff in our like it's a fantasy world that also constantly makes references to things in our world as well.
Yeah. I mean, he immediately hits you with the fact that this is going to be just irreverent
Yeah,
and clever and not take itself too seriously. And I just love in the second sentence he says, uh, "Dance under bare stars because it's springtime, and with any luck, the carbon dioxide will unfreeze again." So it's like, oh, like this, like on an alien planet with aliens where there's no atmosphere and the carbon dioxide freezes every winter.
yeah,
It's like ridiculous, just like cosmic weirdness thrown in there, and then we're um back to whimsicality.
yeah,
It's so funny. I mean, my take on the thematic level, why begin the book this way, is it's a celebration of spring. It's a celebration of life, and there's also an aspect of death in it, right? Because they
yeah.
roast an ox to celebrate the spring, and so they literally kill something to celebrate new life, which is it's the kind of thing where I'm like, yeah, obviously that's tied into the themes of what he's saying with this story. The problem is I don't think I can articulate beyond that observation what exactly it means.
Yeah, well, I mean, so there is at the end of the book there is another dance, the dance they're talking about, which is similar to the Morris dance, but they're wearing black instead of white. I believe that's correct, right? And I think that is there is this life and death. There's this cyclical life and death thing going on in this book in really interesting ways. I mean, let's kind of just get into the what we think the book is saying, or what we're trying to think the book is saying here, and we can kind of thread this conversation through all of our other ones, but. Um, there is this book has two characters, one of which was supposed to be an eternal that never died, finds he's suddenly immortal. The other is a guy who is about to die, anxiously awaiting death, finds himself to be immortal, right? So we have like
Mm.
this kind of dichotomy of characters across this thing that are experiencing life in different ways. And then we have this really interesting thread through the story of technology and progress and like the combine harvester, and then the entire thing with the snow globes that turn into shopping carts that turn into a shopping mall. And that's I have trouble, like I can see this idea of technology and progress and moving on, and I can see this idea of death and eventuality, and I'm not sure, like I can almost see the shape of these two things coming together.
Yeah. I mean, my feeling right now, and I think it's probably more than this, is uh, the the new has to replace the old, meaning
Hmm.
the old has to move along,
Yeah.
meaning that is the purpose of death. Basically, the purpose of death is that the old must move aside to make way for the new. This is this is all throughout the story. We'll talk about it, but the idea that when death stops working, the old remains around and becomes pathological, and the new can't find a foothold, and everything gets messed up. and like you said, technology is one way it manifests, but also just like literal piles of garbage turning back into living things somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, I like that. That again, that feels. I feel like it is like I'm supposed to get something a little bit more specific than that. So
Yeah, I mean,
I want to keep digging.
obviously, like the part that's the most clear to me is the stuff with Death himself, and the part that's the least clear to me is the stuff with our wizard friend. But it's interesting, right? Because I do think there's this excess of life creates this the shopping mall, which is just this like this uh, monument to consumerism and to the future, and it's like this thing that represents progress in a certain way. So like the idea that yes, the bad things need to go to allow progress, but also there's this idea that well, not too much progress, because then we
Yeah.
have stuff like this, and our characters, our undead characters, literally defeat the shopping mall.
Mhm.
The, so it's the people that won't go that halt this new thing.
So it's like there's a sense of a balance, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And John is saying the shopping mall bit is very early '90s, and I think you're so right. Like, there's this idea, like the mall rats era of like the proliferation of malls and this kind of dystopian version of like just of mall life. And I just don't know how to connect it, but I'm jumping ahead. I just wanted to get into it just to state my confusion here. I think let's kind of try to unpack it as we go.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's move on to the next slide. And in this slide, we have Death discovering his own imminent death. Picture the scene, and now add the sharp clicking of bone on stone. Getting closer. A dark shape crosses the field of vision and moves up the endless shelves of sibilant glassware. Click, click. Here's a glass with the top bulb nearly empty. Bone fingers rise and reach out. Select. And another. Select. And more. Many, many more. Select. Select. It's all in a day's work. Or it would be, if days existed here. Click, click. The dark shape moves patiently among the rows. And stops. And hesitates. Because here's a small gold timer not much bigger than a watch. It wasn't there yesterday, or wouldn't have been if yesterday's existed here. Bony fingers closed around it and hold it up to the light. It's got a name on it in small capital letters. The name is Death. Death put down the timer and then picked it up again. The sands of time were already pouring through. He turned it over experimentally, just in case. The sands went on pouring, only now it was going upwards. He hadn't really expected anything else. It meant that even if tomorrows could exist here, there weren't going to be any, not anymore. There was a movement in the air behind him. Death turned slowly and addressed the figure that wavered indistinctly in the gloom. Why? It told him. But that is not right. It told him that no, it was right. Not a muscle moved on Death's face, because he hadn't got any. I shall appeal. It told him he should know that there was no appeal. Never any appeal. Never any appeal. Death thought about this, and then he said, I have always done my duty as I saw fit. The figure floated closer. It looked vaguely like a gray-robed and hooded monk. It told him, we know. That is why we're letting you keep the horse. Oh boy. So yeah, this is kind of our inciting incident of the whole book, is that Death is going to die.
Yeah, and this is more or less our introduction to the character of Death in this book, or close to it at least. And so I probably pulled way too many Death slides, or Bill Dorr, as we'll call him, because I love this character and he's the best character.
Yeah.
And he was the most interesting and the most fun to me, at least, and the most rich. I probably didn't pull like nearly enough like Wizard Gang slides, because like that was more like comic relief hijinks, and I was just like, I don't have anything to say about this, which might have been a mistake, but
no, I think I'm with you there. I found myself just like, I found myself chuckling along with the undead group people, but I found myself riveted by the death parts. And that's not to say the death parts were not funny as well. They certainly were. There's a lot of funniness in this passage right here, but I found myself so much more invested in that storyline. And to the point where, like, my initial reaction was, man, the whole book should have just been that. And my reaction to that was to step back and go, well, wait a minute. No, like, if Pratchett wanted to include that other storyline, there has to be something key to the themes that I'm not understanding in it. And I do think there is part of it that it has to be this cyclical nature of it, as cyclical, as one of our listeners said. This idea that there's both sides of this whole thing. That the idea of granted mortality and the idea of granted immortality kind of competing on battling on the same disc, as it were, I think is really key to what this book is doing. But I still found that I liked death and this stuff a lot more.
Yeah, I definitely like death more, but I also wouldn't say that I was like that I ever disliked or was bored by the other parts. It's more that like as I was trying to pull the slides, I was like, I don't want to pull a slide and just be like, this was funny.
Right.
There's like nothing to talk about there.
Sure.
Really. I mean, unless you just want to talk about how the joke worked, which I don't know if anyone wants us to hear us dissect Terry Pratchett's jokes. So that's the thing is like it's great. The reason I didn't pull it is that I don't know if it can be analyzed in that way. But regarding this passage that we're discussing now, one thing I love that he does throughout this book, and I think it just might be the thing that he likes doing with the whole Discworld thing, is a kind of whimsical exploration of like time and space, and this idea that like this place where death lives is like outside of time. It's an eternal present. It's always now. It's just that there are earlier nows and later nows, and it's like like you kind of like when he says that, you kind of stop and you're like, wait a second,
that's just the past and present?
Yeah, you're like it like doesn't really make sense, but it doesn't make sense in a way that feels like a Zen koan, and you're like, oh, okay, that's fun. That tickles my imagination in fun ways, even if it's fun nonsense is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I love that like all of this is almost textually just created for the benefit of the reader, that like these, because none of these things really exist, like this room doesn't actually exist, or it's not necessary for it to exist. Like the golden hourglass is a symbol. It's not an actual, it has no actual power to it. And I think it's cool that the book actually uses that when it has the other character just summon the hourglass herself, because it's like it's just a thing. It's like anyone could do it because it's nothing. I think it's really cool how it kind of takes this kind of metaphysical stuff and just says, yeah, it's just an image. It's just an idea, and anyone has the power to that idea.
Yeah. I think that is cool. I suppose it's worth mentioning and discussing at this point that the reason they decide that Death has to die is that he's developed a personality.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting. It was a detail that I had forgotten until I was rereading it to make the notes, and I was like, what does that mean exactly? So the implication being he would have been permitted to continue existing as long as he was just an impersonal force. But now that he's developed a personality, that can't be allowed to persist forever. That has to, I suppose, move on and make space for something new eventually, if that's our kind of idea about what the purpose of death is.
Yeah, but it's interesting because like his development of a personality is almost entirely out of his control, because like it's because of people personifying death. Like people created the Grim Reaper image. Like death was just an idea, and then people put a skeleton with a scythe to it, and that's not his fault. And the book kind of plays on the fact that this is an inevitability anywhere. Like I love the idea of the rat version of death that's just a rat with a scythe and a black cloak, that just like, we're going to personalize death. You can't stop death from having a personality. And I think that maybe that's one of the things that the book concludes on, is that we're always going to assign personality and meaning and importance to things like high concepts like death that we can't escape from ever. We're gonna breathe life into those things because we feel like we have to, because they terrify us and we need to understand it in a certain way.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. John says something along those lines about how good about how Pratchett says, or he has death think they're not just metaphors, they're people. So I think this is a tool that he's using in the story, and I think in many of his stories, and even I think multiple times in this story, where a way that he goes about exploring a an idea is to just kind of make the idea be a person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like death is obviously the most obvious example in this book, but you could also say that the undead zombie wizard is is a a personification of the idea of living beyond your allotted span.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there and there's or the shopping mall is sort of the not personification but manifestation of um, I don't know exactly. Still don't quite understand what's going on with the
Well, I
shopping
mean,
mall.
let's try to. I don't know if there's going to be a slide that we can try to unpick this a little bit more, but there is something really fascinating to this idea that the the wizard character, and I don't know why I'm having such trouble remembering people's names in this story.
I think it's Wendell, but
Yeah.
I'm also having a hard time remembering it for some reason.
Um, I like is a man who had basically lived 130 years and basically wasted his entire life. Right? He didn't do anything. He didn't accomplish anything really. He kind of just sat in the university, and especially the last 60 years of his life, and he's just like anxiously awaiting a new life. And what he gets to do in this undeath is to like accomplish something, like to
Mm-hmm.
do something, and to live life and to experience other people and to learn things. And he kind of plants love between this werewolf and werehuman, which is just fucking hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's really interesting that like that is kind of the other side of what's happening here, is that we have a guy who's been who's a personification of a concept, learning what life is, and then you have someone that lived an entire life but also failed to learn about life. And
Yeah.
like the mall is, I mean, let's like stop here and think about what a mall is. Like a mall is just like the idea of, in the same way that like a combine harvester is just a mass produced way of reaping.
Yeah.
It is a mass produced way of acquiring.
Or you could say living.
Yeah, yeah.
If the combine is mechanized death, the mall is mechanized life. It's like a kind of life that has been stripped of its meaning to the point that it is almost undeath now.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Yeah, no, I like
I'm
that.
not sure, but
Well, I mean, because it's like it's trade,
mhm.
like they describe it as like an artificial city that's built up, and because the cities
Uh-huh.
are kind of built around trade and built around um it is an existence around commercialism in a lot of ways. It just
Yeah.
like it is the epitome of a life of commercialism, whereas as the meantime death is learning about the simplicity of a different kind of life.
Yeah. Another take could be like a mall is what happens when you have pushed death and the necessity of death so far out of your mind that you come to actually believe that life is just like stasis.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is kind of what we've done with our modernity and all of our technology is we have pushed the idea of death out of our minds to the point where I mean honestly like this book was moderately upsetting to me in certain ways. And you and I talked about this off air a bit, but like I don't like death.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a person of the late 20th century. Death is not something that I am comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
I was vegetarian for quite a few years because I was so uncomfortable with the idea of animals having to die so that I could eat. And I only cut it out because it was affecting my health. And like the death of people is terribly disturbing to me. I don't like it. I think it's bad. I think it's pretty uncomplicatedly bad actually. But like the reason that's able to happen is because I have basically grown up in like the most death-free environment in the history of the world where um I've sort of grown up in the civilizational shopping mall, you could say,
Yeah.
as have we all mostly. I would say. And I think here he's saying like, yeah, well, that's a bit sterile and it disconnects you from the reality of your humanity because we
Yeah.
are going to die.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, I don't think the message of the book is that death is good, but that it's an
Yeah,
inevitability, and
part of yeah,
subtracting it from existence leads to badness. I mean, yeah, it is interesting the ways in which this book is pretty severely critical on modern living,
mhm,
and like I think you're absolutely right with this. I think you're totally just like kind of locked the book into place for me in a way, and I'm really really loving it. This is why I love this book club, Matt, because like I'm just experiencing these things real time right now, and I'm not speaking well about it, but I'm totally with you on that.
yeah. That feels pretty right to me. Let's keep testing it as we go, though.
Sure, sure. Miss Evil Doom says a mall is a city without the people, and that's perfect as well. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There was something like really spooky about, like, I don't know. I didn't realize it was a shopping mall right away. Um, and then when I figured it out as a shopping mall, I was like, oh wait, that's real. That's real good. And it's this really spooky place. Like it's
Hmm.
empty and glass and walls and
Yeah,
ridiculous signs and yeah.
right. I mean, the ambulatory shopping carts were I didn't know what to make of them really, but yeah.
It like anything in this book, like I love that this transformation from snow globe to the shopping cart to the mall, like it took me. I mean, maybe not everyone had this experience, but it took me like an extra couple pages before when I think you're supposed to figure it out to where I got what those things were. And I was like, oh wait, it's a snow globe.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I got it. It's just a snow globe. Um, I think that made it more delightful for me though.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the fun way that he writes about it, where he's letting you figure it out. I
Hmm.
think that's one fun thing about Pratchett actually is he's expecting you to keep up. He never really spells things out for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I've never been in an empty mall, Cass. Although I hear like there's all these books I read where they make like abandoned malls like this the setting of some creepy part of the story,
I love it.
and I got to imagine it's terrifying. Yeah, just this giant, massive space
Yeah,
with corners and cubbies and uh, uh
yeah. Echoing silence, and also
yeah,
you're used to there being a lot of people, and so you expect there to be.
malls, man. Like people are gonna read this book in 20 years and be like, "What's a mall?"
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Malls are dying.
yeah. Seriously. Yeah. All right. Shall we move on to the next page?
Yeah.
All right. So here we have Wendell Poons celebrating his death party. Bye then, Wendell, he said, shaking the old man's parchment like hand. The old place won't seem the same without you. Don't know how we'll manage, said the bursar, thankfully. Good luck in the next life, said the dean. Drop in if you're ever passing and happen to, remember who you've been. Don't be a stranger, you hear, said the arch chancellor. Wendell Poons nodded amiably. He hadn't heard what they were saying. He nodded on general principles. The wizards, as one man, faced the door. The hatch under the 12 snapped up again. Bing bong bong bing, said the demon. Bingly bong bingly bong bong bing bing. What? Said the bursar, jolted. 9:30, said the demon. The wizards turned to Wendell Poons. They looked faintly accusing. What are you all looking at? He said. The second hand on the watch squeaked onwards. How are you feeling? Said the dean loudly. Never felt better, said Wendell. Is there any more of that rum left? The assembled wizards watched him pour generous measure into his beaker. You want to go easy on that stuff, said the dean nervously. Good health, said Wendell Poons.
And then he died.
And then he died, but not really. He sort of died. He half
Sure,
died.
sure. So first of all, we got to talk about all these characters here because the bursar, the arch chancellor, and the dean are like some of the most fucking hilarious characters I've
It,
ever read.
it's very funny, and this is honestly one of the few opportunities we're gonna get a chance to talk about them. So,
Okay, so let's talk about them. They're all idiots, and
yeah,
it's amazing. And these are like supposed to be like in any other story, like the College of Wizards are like the supposed to be like the smartest, most clever, best people in the
yeah,
world, and they're just incompetent in
yeah.
hilarious ways.
And they all have these highfalutin titles.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, they're basically the Three Stooges, except I don't remember. There's not really three of them, but like there's a sapient orangutan.
Yeah.
There's it's just wacky and wild and hilarious. And
There's an
I mean,
entire part where I think it's the dean won't stop saying yo,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I puts us in our 90s mall rat stuff, right?
uh-huh.
Um, it's just so delightful.
Yeah, it's very fun. Um,
Who
yeah,
burn Braintree? Braintree says sounds like academia.
yeah, right. I mean they do sound like a bunch of academics. That's actually a fair point. Um, uh, Wendell Poons is is also a really good character. Like
Yes.
I like his introduction, which this is not exactly his introduction, but this is close to his introduction, where he's like a very out of it and detached old like ancient man who is basically confused about about who the people around him are. He doesn't. You get the sense that it's been like 40 years since he was actually like relevant to
Hmm.
the world at all. And like and this scene plays it for comedy where like he's talking to people who have been dead for 50 years or whatever, and he can't remember who anyone is, but like, and then that's interestingly juxtaposed because when he comes back to life, he has like clarity, like
Yeah.
he has like the mind of a young man again, and it's different, and so there's a lot of interesting exploration I think that comes there. That's it's actually deeper than you would at first imagine from this sort of goofy comic relief old man character.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things I want to talk about here. I think that the big one is this idea that in this part of the world, death has become, you know, it's not necessarily quote unquote bad, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
no one here is sad about this death. No one
Mm-hmm.
here is feeling like they've lost anyone. They're just like, well, okay, get out. And so like I think the book's stance on death is that it's not that it's a good thing necessarily, but it is a necessary thing. It
Mm-hmm.
is an inevitable thing, but that doesn't mean we should treat it as if just commodify it and act in this way as well. Like there's such an indifference to it, and like
Mm-hmm.
to where like this guy is sticking around, and all they can think of is how to get rid of him.
Yeah.
It's such a callous look at the loss of a life.
Yeah, it's funny. The comparison to academia is striking to me because there's the quote of like, science advances one funeral at a time, where you can kind of imagine that these, you know, pseudo academics are waiting for Wendell to shuffle off the mortal coil so that somebody can take his seat on the Wizard Council, or however these things
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
Um, and Yeah, because you're exactly right. None of these people care about him or have a personal relationship with him. And when he comes back to life, it's just like, a crisis that they have to deal with. And um, yeah, I mean, I do think there's more going on with them than just, you know, comic relief, because they do have this sort of cruel and detached and bureaucratic like way of reacting to his existence,
yeah.
and also the subsequent disaster with the shopping carts and everything, where it's like yeah, they're idiots and they're funny, but like they're embodying a particular stance toward the world. I think I have even less idea what's going on with them than I do with any other part of the book, though. So I invite people's commentary on this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. I feel like I'm stretching the metaphor, and part of this is I think John just reminding me that Terry Pratchett died of Alzheimer's, and you could look at Wendell Poons as not just a person who wouldn't die, but as just the kind of the personification of this idea of the elderly that have worn out their welcome in society, and the way
Hmm.
we kind of treat that segment of the population as people that we kind of just wish would like get out of the way. Like
Hmm.
we don't see value in them. We don't want them around. We just kind of want to push them out. And you could look at, and I haven't thought this through enough to take the entire group of the undead and like map a metaphor on what portion of society that like the zombie and the vampires and the werewolves and all, but they're the undead are like outcasts of society, that we really just would like you to go ahead and die. Okay, already.
Yeah.
Just please just die.
Right.
You're not serving any value. You're not doing anything. Please get out of here.
Yeah, and I mean, on that line, like it's played as a comedy scene when they bury him alive.
Yeah, yeah.
But let me just say that again. They bury him alive when he comes back to life because
Hmm.
they're like, we really just need you to be dead now.
Yeah,
And it's like yeah, that's kind of horrible actually. Yeah, like Cass is saying, he's worn out his usefulness. They want to get rid of him. You get the sense they'd be happy if he was just like not here anymore.
yeah.
But it's like, well, you're messing up the natural order of things. We're just going to bury you in this coffin, and we're going to play it as funny because he's going to act like he's glad and like thankful, and it's like, no, this is awful.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of internalized the whole thing. All he can think about is like his next life.
Right. Right.
And I mean, they kind of treat reincarnation as an inevitability in this world, which I don't know. I mean, again, I don't know a lot about Discworld. Maybe that's just true. Maybe like this is a world just where reincarnation exists, but it doesn't. Death never mentions that, so
Hmm.
it could just be their belief system. And so it's like looking to the next thing, not focusing on the current thing.
Yeah, I guess I do want to comment on that briefly. The idea of number one, Wendell's fixation on his next life. He's basically already moved on in a
Yeah,
sense. He's like,
yeah,
I'm not. He's checked out even though he's still alive, and it's like, well, that's no way to live either. Like that's we see as he kind of comes back to himself that he is capable of
yeah.
being lively and being meaningful in the world. And then as an abstract idea, the fact that they all believe in reincarnation, I'm always a little bit uncertain how to respond to that in a book that's trying to have a theme of death, because it's like you're basically saying death doesn't exist. You're saying that when you die, it's just that your body shuts down and then you go somewhere else and you have a different existence. And I'm like, that's not death. Death is the thing where you die. And if we're not talking about that, then I don't know what we're talking about. Like what is the value of having this conversation if we're actually talking about like a nicer, friendlier thing that is not actually the scary, horrible thing that we're all scared of.
Well, yeah, but
Um,
I think the nicer, friendlier thing is the thing that we attach onto the thing that scares us more than anything in the world, which is not existing. And
it's
so,
it, yeah. No, you're definitely right. But I'm like, if you're gonna write a book that's struggling with the idea of death, then I would prefer to struggle with the scariest form of what death actually is, which is annihilation.
isn't it
Um,
isn't it interesting though that the removal of death does not mean the it does not mean Wendell still dies. Like he just that life just doesn't have anywhere to go. It's not like there's a version of this book in which death stops existing, and so like people can like jump off a building and just get up and walk away. That's not quite what's happening here. Like these
yeah,
Wendell dies, he just goes back into his body, and
right.
the like other things are still dying. That life force is just like so death is almost the, the transfer of it. It doesn't
Hmm.
stop the body from dying. It doesn't stop the biology from ceasing to function. It just transfers that somewhere else.
That's a really good point. I mean, it you're absolutely right there. Like that ties into uh, the whole idea of like what is the nature of this life force. And I don't know. There's a lot of great conversation happening in the chat right now. People are saying that John's saying he doesn't think reincarnation is actually real. He thinks that's just their belief.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Cass made some remarks along the lines that if you if you lose all of your memories and your personality when you're reincarnated, then didn't you basically actually die?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'd be like, I guess, but like that's also an interesting question worth considering. It doesn't seem like an obvious definite yes from me, because like if there is a thread of consciousness that continues on, that's not annihilation. Like if you have if you hit your head and lose all your memories, you didn't die, right? You just lost your memories.
Yeah, I mean,
So
if there's truly no thread of continued consciousness, in a reincarnation scenario, then is it reincarnation? Like, you know,
Right.
like,
Right.
it doesn't matter. Like, if there's a person that was your matter and your soul and your existence, but they have absolutely zero chance of ever accessing anything that is or was you, what it's not to the you, it's immaterial, I
Yeah.
guess. I mean, I guess not. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get into this.
Well,
Is getting into a lot of heady stuff.
to continue this conversation, please look up our discussion of the video game Soma.
Oh my god, yeah.
But for now, we're going to continue talking about this Discworld novel.
Yes. We got a little off on a tangent here,
We did.
folks.
It happens.
Let's talk about Bill Dorr and his
Okay.
seeking of employment. You're to sleep in the barn, you understand? She said. Sleep? Yes, of course. Yes, I will have to sleep. Couldn't have you in the house anyway. It wouldn't be right. The barn will be quite adequate, I assure you. But you can come into the house for your meals. Thank you. My name is Miss Flitworth. Yes. She waited. I expect you to have a name, too, she prompted. Yes, that's right. She waited again. I'm sorry? What is your name? See, I'm laughing just reading it because it's really funny. The stranger stared at her for a moment and then looked around wildly. Come on, said Miss Flitworth. I ain't employing no one without a name. Mr. The figure stared upwards. Mr. Sky? No one's called Mr. Sky. Mr. Door? She nodded. Could be Mr. Door. There was a chap called Doors I knew once. Yeah, Mr. Door. And your first name? Don't tell me you haven't got one of those too. You've got to be a Bill or a Tom or a Bruce or one of those names. Yes. What? One of those. Which one? The first one. You're a Bill? Yes. Miss Flitworth rolled her eyes. All right, Bill Sky, she said. Door. Yeah, sorry. All right, Bill Door. Call me Bill.
it's so funny that like you get to know the personality of Death so well, and it's so funny because I'm always imagining him as a skeleton in a black robe, regardless of what's happening, which makes it even funnier.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's so important that Death has a personality, right? Because that's the inciting incident of the book, is that Death has a personality. So we need to give, like, the funniest bit in this whole damn thing is that he goes through this whole thing, and then she calls him Bill Sky, and he corrects her. this made up name, and then call me Bill is it's so good.
I also love that Pratchett has been able to sort of give us enough of an image of Miss Flitworth so quickly where you realize that she's not an idiot. She's just playing along. She's like, oh, okay, you don't want to tell me your real name.
Yes.
So we're going to make up a name for you, whatever. You must be. And then later she thinks to herself, like, yeah, he's probably on the run from something.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's Pratchett just trusts you to catch it. So.
No one's called Mr. Sky.
People are pointing out that he's not a skeleton in a black robe. He's a skeleton in overalls.
Yes.
That's very fair.
It's true.
I found a lot of great art for this, by the way, which should be rotating behind me right now on the YouTube video.
Mm-hmm.
It was really excellent. A lot of images of skeleton in overalls. So
yeah, it's really great. Just Death becoming a Reaper.
Yeah.
It's just so good. It's just like you just can just imagine Terry Pratchett sitting in his office one day and just had this idea of, what if I make Death just literally harvest wheat? That'd be fun. And then voila, a story.
Yeah. There were probably like 20 slides that I pulled and then deleted for time that were just like awesome or funny Death moments in this book. Like I love the one that happens not too long after this where apparently his scythe technique is that he only ever cuts one piece of straw, piece of wheat, one what's the word for a piece of wheat, whatever, with one per stroke.
Yeah.
And it's like, but like it's never actually described what this looks like. It's just like you imagine it's just like buzzing down a row of wheat stalks
one at a time,
but somehow incredibly fast.
But and this is what I actually think it elevates this book from just being like, hey, that was funny, to, oh wait, this means something. Is that actually plays in to the overall themes of the story, right? Because like death should be personal. It should not be like it should be this individual, take the time, take one person at a time. Like what he does for Miss Flitworth at the end of the book is so powerful because it's personal and it's for her and it's significant. It shouldn't be this, combine harvester rip everything all at once. It should be one stalk at a time, which is why the end image of him like changing the hourglasses to a field of wheat representing each thing representing the life of a person is so beautiful, because it should be this individual beautiful thing, and not just a thing that counts down time, and not just something that should be just swiped at broadly. So it's funny, but it also matters.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's his. This is part of his personality. Actually, is that he's opinionated about how death should be, how death should conduct himself.
Yes, the other death is so dramatic.
The other death is not respectful of individual life, and it it enrages him. We pulled that slide, so we'll talk about that when we get there.
567 says stalk of wheat. Cass says blade of. These both work better than us just fumbling over thingy.
Wheat thing. Yeah. All right, shall we move on?
Kirk is asking if we pulled anything where the child recognizes that he's a skeleton. And
no, I mean,
no, he didn't.
That was one that I copied out, and then I was like, oh, there's no time. That like because this is mainly just funny, but no, that was all great.
It was very good.
The child noticing that he's a skeleton and then having a conversation with him. Oh yeah, I mean, I laughed a lot at that part where the child is like, I got new socks. Oh, I see. It's so good. And like Death has never really talked to a child, so he doesn't realize like that he needs to end the conversation.
Yeah.
or humor the child. He's trying to have a normal conversation. That's the best.
Unfortunately, Matt, I think Death has talked to some children before.
That's true, but never had a conversation with a child.
Sure.
But yes. All right. Next, we're going to visit with Mrs. Cake as she consults with One Man Bucket, her spirit guide. Mrs. Cake knew who she was going to call. You there, One Man Bucket? She said. Then she ducked, just in case. A reedy and petulant voice oozed out of the air. Where have you been? I can't move in here. Mrs. Cake bit her lip. Such a direct reply meant her spirit guide was worried. When he didn't have anything on his mind, he spent 5 minutes talking about buffaloes and great white spirits, although if One Man Bucket had ever been near white spirits, he'd drunk it, and it was anyone's guess what he'd do to a buffalo. And he kept putting ums and hows into the conversation. What do you mean? There been a catastrophe or something? Some kind of 10-second plague? No, don't think so. There's real pressure here, you know. What's hoking everything up? What do you mean? Shut up, shut up, shut up. I'm trying to talk to the lady. You over there. Keep the noise down. Oh, yeah, says you. Mrs. Cake was aware of other voices trying to drown him out. One Man Bucket. Heathen savage, am I? So you know what this heathen savage says to you? Yeah? Listen, I've been here for 100 years, me. I don't have to take talk like that from someone who's still warm. Tight, that does it. You. His voice faded. Mrs. Cake set her jaw. His voice came back. Oh yeah? Oh yeah, well, maybe you was big when you was alive, friend, but here and now you're just a bedsheet with holes in it. Oh, so you don't like that, eh? He's going to start a fight again, Mum, said Ludmilla, who was curled up by the kitchen stove. He always calls people friend just before he hits them. Mrs. Cake sighed.
This is a hilarious scene because this is her spiritual medium who's just mad because his place is crowded.
Right. There's other ghosts showing up, and taking his spotlight away, I guess. And apparently he's like a cantankerous and difficult to manage ghost, which is also funny.
One Man Bucket. What a name. One Man Bucket.
It's great. We're not going to spend a lot of time with Mrs. Cake and Ludmilla either, so this is an opportunity to talk about these characters.
Yes. Mrs. Cake the medium, but she's really quite small. Actually, that God, that was so good. Thank you for reminding me of that 567. I forgot about that entire joke.
There's so many little one-off puns like this where
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember any of them either, but you're just like,
It's so clever, and it's clever, but in a way that it's like it's aware it's clever, but it's clever enough that you don't mind its awareness of itself. I don't know. I really liked it.
yeah, I think he strikes the tone where he can get away with that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And John is. Are we gonna get to talk about the Ludmilla and the Wereman subplot at all?
I don't know if there's a specific better slide for that. So if this is a good time to talk about Ludmilla, we should talk about like yeah, Ludmilla, she's a werewolf and then she falls in love with a wereman
The Wereman.
wolf.
Yeah. Thanks to our good boy Mr. Poons, just
Yeah.
kind of subtly pushing that towards each other.
Yeah.
It's delightful. It really is. I mean, like, and I think it goes into like poor Ludmilla has kind of just been stuffed and hidden away by her mother because of embarrassment at her were nature,
Mhm.
and it's just another example of kind of a certain segment of people being pushed out of life because they're inconvenient to the rest of them. Us.
Mhm. Yeah, right. I think that's what we can say about all of the characters in the focus the support group
Mm-hmm.
who we're going to meet pretty soon actually. But yeah, that's I know that's actually the next slide, so we could just move on into that and
Yeah, let's
maybe
do
just
that.
kind of continue that conversation there.
Sure, sure. All right. Wendell Poons, now a zombie, joins an undead support group. Don't stand in the doorway, friend. Don't block up the hall. Come on in. Wendell Poons blinked in the gloom. When his eyes became accustomed to it, he realized that there was a semicircle of chairs in an otherwise rather bare and dusty room. They were all occupied. In the center, at the focus, as it were, of the half circle, was a small table at which someone had been seated. They were now advancing towards him, with their hand out and a big smile on their face. Don't tell me. Let me guess, they said. You're a zombie, right? Er, Windlepoons had never seen anyone with such pallid skin, such as there was of it before, or wearing clothes that looked as if they'd been washed in razor blades and smelled as though someone had not only died in them, but was still in them, or sporting a glad to be gray badge. I don't know, he said. I suppose so. Only they buried me, you see, and there was this card. He held it out, like a shield. Course there was, said the figure. He's going to want me to shake hands, Wendell thought. If I do, I just know I'm going to end up with more fingers than I started with. Oh my goodness, will I end up like that? And I'm dead, he said lamely. And fed up with being pushed around, eh? Said the greenish-skinned one. Wendell shook his hand very carefully. Well, not exactly fed. Shoe's the name. Reg Shoe. Poons, Wendell Poons, said Wendell. Yeah, it's always the same, said Reg Shoe bitterly. Once you're dead, people just don't know what to do, right? They act as if you got some horrible disease. Dying can happen to anyone, right? Everyone, I should have thought, said Wendell. Yeah, I know what it's like. Tell someone you're dead and they look at you as if they've seen a ghost.
It's just so full of humor. Yes, the dead people support group.
Uh-huh.
That's that's a plot thing that we need to talk about.
Sure.
Which again, it's like everything clearly has a purpose. It's just it requires a lot of thought. So okay, the first thing that I wanted to pull out, which is the reason why I started this slide where I did,
Okay.
don't stand in the doorway, friend. Don't block up the hall. For he who gets hurt will be he who is stalled. For the times that are changing.
Oh my god.
Um, do you think number one? Do you think that is that he made that reference on purpose?
100%. Yeah.
And number
I hadn't
two,
realized it, but 100%.
I hadn't realized it until I was looking at this to pull the slide, and now I'm like, well, the times they are changing is like the perfect thing to reference for this story.
Yeah.
So that just sounded really, that just like felt really right to me. Um,
Yeah. For those that don't know, this is a Bob Dylan song.
yeah, it's the Bob Dylan. I believe it's called
The times they are
The
changing.
Times They're
Yeah.
Changing. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, and these are our outcasts. These are our people who the world wants to move on. They want them to be rid of because they don't have any use for them. And these people are a group who have sort of. I don't think it would actually be correct to say that they've gathered together to push back against that. There's really just the one of them who
Yeah.
who sees himself as like a dead people activist. The rest of them he just happens to have gathered together.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that they're just kind of there to humor him in a lot of ways, but they're
Hmm.
also like they're also have their own problems. I mean, there's
Yeah,
the shy boogeyman. There's the vampires. The vampires are so good.
yeah,
The blocking or the dropping of the W's and the picking them back up again is just delightful. But yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that I mean that the Bob Dylan song is literally about people like things are changing and you need to either get out of the way or or join
or
up
go
with the
along with it.
cause.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And I think that fits a lot of what was happening. Like, man, I'm trying to tie this back to the themes that we've been talking about of like, hey, death is inevitable, and it needs to happen, but like, it doesn't mean we should be cavalier about it. And I don't know how to tie the song to that exactly, but I think there's something there.
Yeah, right. It's one of those elements where we could easily spend 10 minutes trying to pick at it, and maybe find something, but I don't see anything immediate. Kirk points out that very few of the people here are actually undead, which is funny. They also eventually pick up or I think the were man is already here, and I
Hmm.
think I don't think they've picked up Lidmilla yet at this point.
Not yet, no.
But now it's basically just a group of outcasts.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something to the fact that they're basically all passive except for the one guy who has left the notes that brought them all here. Like
Yeah.
they don't really know what to do, and so it was actually really easy to get them all gathered here because they're sort of looking for any direction, because I guess that's part of the nature of them being dead is they don't they don't have a ton of agency left to them. They're just like I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be elsewhere. And so I mean that's what's cool about Wendell Poons is he goes from someone who just kind of does whatever is suggested. He even lets them bury him alive or bury him undead, um, uh, to being someone who is like active in the story.
Yeah. Yeah. Did I have a question for you about Wendell Poons?
Uh-huh.
How what was your mind's eye image of him? Because this really interesting thing happened to me, and I realized it halfway through I was reading it that when he's first introduced, I saw him as the old man, but as the
Uh-huh.
story went on, my mind just made the way he looked into a young person because the way his mind works is much younger. Like,
Uh-huh.
I just stopped seeing him as the old crusty man in my head. Like, I just didn't anymore because that's not the way he's behaving.
I literally did the same thing. I don't know if I saw him as like a young man specifically, but
No, no, no. Yeah.
I saw him as no longer old and decrepit, but like to the extent that I visualized him, I did see him as because the idea of what's happening in the story is he is almost like revivifying and coming back to life and living his life in a way that he hasn't maybe ever
Hmm.
before,
Yeah.
maybe even when he was young. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Pratchett breathes so much life into him that you just de-age him a little bit in your head. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, he really
interesting.
becomes really great by the end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kirk is saying they did the same thing, so it's good.
so funny.
We weren't alone with this, yeah. And I
That is so
think to
funny.
me, when I share something like that, and I get multiple people saying, "Yes, me too," my like gut reaction is, okay, well then Pratchett was constructing that on purpose, like that
Uh-huh.
he's trying to make you feel that way.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
that's
really
awesome.
cool. Yeah.
I love that.
All right, you want to move on to what's next, or you want to talk about this group more?
No, I don't think I have any more to say about this for now.
All right.
All right. So here we have Death struggling with the idea of killing. Miss Flitworth had several pots on the stove when he came in. It smells good, Bill volunteered. He reached for a wobbling pot lid. Miss Flitworth spun around. Don't touch it. You don't want that stuff. It's for the rats. Do rats not feed themselves? You bet they do. That's why we're going to give them a little extra something before the harvest. A few dollops of this around the holes and no more rats. It took a little while for Bill Dorr to put two and two together, and when this took place, it was like megaliths meeting. That is poison. Essence of spichel mixed with oatmeal never fails. And they die instantly, straight over and legs in the air. We're having bread and cheese, she added. I ain't doing big cooking twice in one day, and we're having chicken tonight. Talking of chicken, in fact, come on. She took a cleaver off the rack and went out into the yard. Cyril the cockerel eyed her suspiciously from the top of the midden. His harem of fat and rather elderly hens, who had been scratching up the dust, bounded unsteadily toward Miss Flitworth in the broken knicker elastic run of hens everywhere. She reached down quickly and picked one up. It regarded Bill Dorr with bright, stupid eyes. Do you know how to pluck a chicken? Said Miss Flitworth. Bill looked from her to the hen. But we feed them, he said helplessly. And now suddenly he hits you with the feelings.
Yeah.
Not fair.
How? He's death, and yet.
He's death. But he doesn't want to be responsible for killing. He's just the force that facilitates the moving on. The idea of ending a life, especially now that he's experienced it, is so terrible. And that's what's so great about this is he's like a child who's only actually encountering these ideas for the first time. And actually, I think a lot of the slides that I've pulled have to do with death coming to grips with the concept of death.
Yeah.
As it's perceived by the living.
Yeah. I mean, there is, like, the inciting incident was he has a personality. We must have this version of death that is completely different and removed from this. But, like, I think the book's argument is that this is better. That, like, death, you know, becoming... It's basically death becoming Jesus, you know. He has to come down and live amongst the people to learn what being a people is like, and then he could go back and return and be better at his job. But I mean, that's kind of exactly what's happening here. He gets an understanding of what life is, and isn't the personification of death understanding what life is like one of the most important things? Like the person who is responsible for ending life in some ways.
You could almost wonder if this wasn't the point the whole time. Like, is it Azrael? Is like the god figure? Like you get the sense there's kind of a twinkle in the eye there, where it's like this was actually intended to teach Death this lesson so that he could, you know, be a better. Thank you for pulling that quote by Polaron. I didn't quite make it onto the slide, but I wanted to include. After lunch, they put down the rat poison. He felt like a murderer. Which I don't know, is just a great kind of coda to that bit. It just didn't really fit in because it wasn't connected to this.
It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah.
It's really awful, and it shows that like the ways in which we've like again, and the rat poison is just like this broad, swooping lack of individuality in the elimination of these rats. It's just lay down a bunch of poison and they all die. Done.
Yep.
But we feed them. Ugh.
Yeah.
It's a chicken. Why do I care so much? I ate chicken today, and yet.
Yeah. I mean, she goes on to kind of justify it in the way that people normally would, where she says, like, yeah, we feed them and they feed us. And which is funny because I don't know how we're supposed to take that as the reader exactly, because it's sort of like a pithy but rather hollow thing to say, because it's like, yeah, but we don't feed them our flesh. We're killing and eating them. We're just giving them corn. This isn't an equivalent exchange here. But no, I mean her point is not completely hollow. She's like, look, like people need to eat to live. This is how life works. Everything eats, everything kills.
But we should have a healthy respect for it as well.
Yes.
All right. So next, we're going to move on to Wendell and company. They are discussing how the world is overflowing with life, and we needed to kind of talk about this concept a little more. It's like a thunderstorm, see? You know how you get that prickly feeling before a storm? That's what's happening now. But why, Mrs. Cake? Well, One Man Bucket says nothing's dying. What? Daft, isn't it? He said lots of lives are ending, but not going away. They're just staying here. What? Like ghosts? Not just ghosts. It's like puddles. When you get a lot of puddles, it's like the sea. Anyway, you only get ghosts from things like people. You don't get ghosts of cabbages. Wendell Poons sat back in his chair. He had a vision of a vast pool of life, a lake being fed by a million short-lived tributaries as living things came to the end of their lifespan, and life force was leaking out as the pressure built up, leaking out wherever it could. Do you think I could have a word with one? He began, and then stopped. He got up and lurched over to Mrs. Cake's mantelpiece. How long have you had this, Mrs. Cake? He demanded, picking up a familiar glassy object. That? Bought it yesterday. Pretty, ain't it? Wendell shook the globe. It was almost identical to the one under his floorboards. Snowflakes whirled up and settled on an exquisite model of unseen university. It reminded him strongly of something. Well, the building obviously reminded him of the university, but the shape of the whole thing, there was a hint of that made him think of breakfast? Why is it happening? He said, half to himself. Those damn things are turning up everywhere. All right. So, life is piling up. Life is piling up.
And it's not just sentience. It's even grass and flowers and cabbages, as they say here. And if you don't clear out the life, if you don't get out the doorway and stop blocking up the hall, then bad things will happen. Yeah, I mean, we kind of did address this already. I put this slide here mainly on the chance that we hadn't addressed the issue of like this metaphorical sort of abstract idea that life force is building up and it needs to go somewhere, and what it chooses to do is build a shopping mall for some reason. And when we did talk about this, although I don't know if we can say we've quite fully nailed it down yet, but I think we've made some progress.
Yeah, I mean, we're very close to like the thematic portion, but the functional storytelling portion, I don't quite understand how it channels itself into these beings that build shopping malls and how that ties into it. You know,
they're trying to come back to life, and for some reason they're coming back as a shopping mall. I don't know. Also, I don't understand the breakfast line. Am I just dense? What am I missing?
Eggs. They remind him of eggs.
The orbs look like eggs? Or?
Yeah.
Eggs.
It's like they're hatching. Yeah, because they're hatching other life. Yeah.
Okay, I gotcha. Apparently Pratchett likes rats. There's lots of rats in the stories. That's interesting.
And he feels bad when they die. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this before, but like lots of lives are ending but not going away. Seems like a pretty important quote in the context of what's happening here.
Yeah. So like there's even the idea that we were talking about a minute ago that like Wendell's life maybe ended even before he died and he didn't go away, and that was bad. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not sure, folks. I'm just not sure.
All right, let's move on. So here we have Bildor facing the inevitability of the end. So what he's doing is he's going to visit the guy who's building the combine.
The blacksmith.
Who are you? Good old Bildor, working for Miss Flitworth? Oh yes, the man in the fire, hero of the hour, I heard. Put it there. He extended a black hand. Bildor looked at it blankly. I am sorry. I still do not know what a 3/8 Gripply is. I mean your hand, Mr. Dorr. Bildor hesitated and then put his hand into the young man's palm. The oil-rimmed eyes glazed for a moment as the brain overruled the sense of touch, and then the smith smiled. The name's Simnel. What do you think, eh? It's a good name. No, I mean the machine. Pretty ingenious, eh? Bildor registered it with polite incomprehension. It looked at first sight like a portable windmill that had been attacked by an enormous insect, and at second sight like a touring torture chamber for an inquisition that wanted to get out and about a bit and enjoy the fresh air. Mysterious jointed arms stuck out at various angles. There were belts and long springs. The whole thing was mounted on spiked metal wheels. Of course you're not seeing it at its best when it's standing still, said Simnel. It needs a horse to pull it. At the moment, anyway. I've got one or two rather radical ideas in that direction, he added dreamily. It's a device of some sort? Simnel looked mildly affronted. I prefer the term machine, he said. It will revolutionize farming methods and drag them kicking and screaming into the century of the fruit bat. My folk have had this forge for 300 years, but Ned Simnel doesn't intend to spend the rest of his life nailing bits of bent metal onto horses, I can tell you. Death glanced under the machine. Sorry, something got cut out there. A dozen sickles were bolted to a big horizontal wheel. Ingenious linkages took power from the wheels via a selection of pulleys to a whirligig arrangement of metal arms. he began to experience a horrible feeling about the thing in front of him, but he asked anyway.
The Combine. The Combine Harvester.
Combine harvester.
Here it is.
It's the new coming in to replace the old, which works on the metaphorical level that the new death is going to shortly come to replace the old death.
Mm-hmm.
And the combine is, of course, death, because it is going to replace the scythe. It's the mechanical scythe.
Yeah, it's a mass reaper.
Yeah, it's a mass reaper, just like this new death who has no respect for life, no respect for individual life. The combine, unlike a scythe, has no human relationship, no direct relationship with what it is harvesting.
But it's like really good at harvesting it, though.
Yeah. So unless we want to talk about the combine more, I did not directly pull the bit when he saves the girl from the fire, because I was like, man, I'm just pulling all of these slides about death. This is just going to be a whole conversation about Bill Dorr.
Well, it is called Reaper Man.
It is called Reaper Man. That's true. But yeah, so he's going to let the girl die because it's her time, and Miss Flitwick, whatever her name is, slaps him, and then he thinks about it, and then he goes in and he saves her. But he saves her using his own time, basically. Yeah. And so that's part of that plays into what's about to happen. So I just thought that was, a great moment. It's a great character moment. It's a great story moment. Just wanted to give us a chance to talk about that, since I don't have a slide on it specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful, right? I mean, it's this idea of like, it's part of his transformation as a person who just looks at death as this inevitability. Like that, yes, death is inevitable and has to happen, but like that doesn't mean like we stand by if we can do something about it. And it's such an I'm not sure where to put it in the grand scheme of this whole thing, but I love the moment where he's just like, well, yeah, just come on, this is what happens. I've seen this, infinity times. Accidents happen and people have to die, and it's like, no, actually, like the whole thing of living is you can stop that. And sometimes, like, death is inevitable for all of us, but that doesn't mean every single time it is, and you can do something about it. You can risk your own life to give life to someone else.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you should accept it if it can be avoided.
Yeah.
But you should try to accept it if it can't be avoided, I think is maybe the attitude.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying it than I did. Yeah, I like that. I like that part a lot.
Yeah, it's great.
Bipolar in, but to Bill Dorr, that was so much horse elbows. God, this book's funny.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Like the combine harvester was like a huge thing in agriculture, right? Like it changed agriculture.
Yeah.
It allowed just this economy of scale in farming that changed the way farming works forever, and you normally would see that as like this great triumph of human ingenuity, right? And I just love how just it's immediately framed as terrifying in the context of this story.
Because it's basically going to be replacing people like Miss Flitworth, who do have this human and humane relationship with the animals, where like, yeah, I have to reap the wheat, I have to kill the chickens, I have to poison the rats. I don't necessarily love that fact, but at least I'm doing it directly with my own hands.
Yeah.
And instead of just mowing it down.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is all. That is all in there for sure. Of course, I love the humor here where he introduces himself and the name's Simnel. What do you think, eh? It's a good name.
It's a good name.
And the bit of the 3/8 Gripply, I think, comes back as a possibly even a 3-beat.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
Like he sabotages the combine.
He does. He does.
Kills the combine, you could say.
He does. He kills death.
Yeah.
And he kills the future.
And so there's a lot of funny here, right? Because so far we've mostly I feel like we've mostly focused on the funny that is in the dialogue, but a lot of the funny is, of course, also not in the dialogue, just in stuff like it looked like a touring torture chamber for an Inquisition that wanted to get out and about a bit and enjoy the fresh air. Like that's such a hilariously like it creates a hilarious image in your mind, and he just blows past it. He doesn't dwell in it. It's I don't know. I love that sort of thing.
He's
That's
just like, yeah, there's like the type of person who like builds to one punchline and then was like, eh? And
yeah.
then there's the type of person that's just like throwing 3,000 funny phrases at you, and like they've got like 20 more coming up, so they don't have time to call attention to any of them.
Yeah.
And that's what he seems like to me.
Yeah, he's just riffing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So in this next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about the consequences of what we talked about last time, which was that he saved this child by giving her some of his time, and he now prepares for the consequences of that decision. How is the child? Bildor unfolded his palm. Miss Flitwick raised her eyebrows. The golden glass was there, the top bulb almost empty, but it simmered in and out of vision. How come you've got it? It's upstairs. She was holding it like it... She floundered, like someone holds something very tightly. She still is, but it is also here, or anywhere. It is only a metaphor, after all. What she's holding looks real enough. Just because something is a metaphor doesn't mean it can't be real. Miss Flitworth was aware of a faint echo in the voice, as though the words were being spoken by two people, but almost, but not quite, in sync. How long have you got? A matter of hours. And the scythe? I gave the blacksmith strict instructions. She frowned. I'm not saying young Simnel's a bad lad, but are you sure he'll do it? It's asking a lot of a man like him to destroy something like that. I had no choice. The little furnace here isn't good enough. It's a wicked sharp scythe. I fear it may not be sharp enough. And no one's ever tried this on you? There is a saying, you can't take it with you? Yes. How many people have seriously believed it?
That was my favorite line of the book, I think. like everyone, you're right. Like everyone says that, but how many people really believe that?
Yeah.
You can't take it with you.
So good. And of course, I mean, Simnel does not destroy the scythe.
Yeah.
He totally, like, Flitworth was totally right about him.
Yeah.
He saves it because it's too pretty to destroy.
Yeah. Because it's old and beautiful. Yeah, Miss Flitworth, by the way, is like a consistently competent and great character, which I guess I haven't focused on specifically just because she's just kind of awesome and a good like mentor to Bildor in what it means to be alive. She's kind of the opposite of Wendell in that she is an elderly person who has like lived her life to the hilt, and like she definitely has regrets and you know, think like but her regrets have to do with having lost someone that she loved. So she actually, you know, loved someone, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting to consider, like she, like her life has in a sense been defined by the fact that she lost this man that she loved, more specifically that he died, and then this is death that is staying with her. You know, death is, you know, in a sense the one who took her man away, but you know she still manages to navigate that. I don't know. I love her character. She's really fun and lovable.
I love this idea that people tell her that he didn't really die. He just ran off with some other woman. And like, it's like something she refuses to accept and doesn't believe it. And of course she's vindicated in the end that she was right. He never stopped loving her. He just died in a freak accident. And so she gets reunited with him at the end. It's really beautiful. And death gives her that.
Yeah. Actually, the main reason I pulled this specifically was just the line, just because something is a metaphor doesn't mean it can't be real.
Yeah.
Which could very well be Terry Pratchett looking at us and saying, just like the characters that I've invented here and all the other ideas in this book where they're clearly metaphors for things, but can't they also be real in some sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, and when I say people, I mean me, sometimes get so wound up in the messages and the thematics and the metaphor of a story that you stop really like thinking of the characters as people and just as vehicles to tell some message or to decode some message. And I do think that, you know, there's two levels you can enjoy stories on. I mean, there's many levels on which you can enjoy stories on, but those two levels are not mutually exclusive. And sometimes I need to remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think it's a very fun and crucial thing to, I think, what Pratchett does in general, because as I mentioned much earlier, like a lot of the things in this story are um, metaphors that he has given either personification or reality in the story, and he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's it can be real. You should think of it as real, actually, even if it is a concept. You should still think of it as real, because a concept can still affect the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of metaphor. I don't know if that's a word, but there's a lot of making death a metaphor, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
making, like death is the next great adventure, blah blah blah. That we build so much meaning and metaphor out of this concept that we forget that it's also a real thing that is real and hard and terrible and inevitable all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of lose track of the intimate, immediate, personal tragedy of death, in this crazy world of combine harvesters and shopping malls and snow
Mm-hmm.
globes. Damn snow globes.
And shopping carts, wire baskets.
Why
Uh,
did it take so long for me to realize that a wire basket was a shopping cart? Why?
Yeah, I totally understood they were supposed to be shopping carts. Definitely understood that. Um, uh, Before we move on, Kirk is pointing out uh, that there's a pretty good death and taxes joke in here, which I did get. I didn't pull it out
Yes,
because
yes.
yeah, but it was great. Miss Evildoom points out that the novel name Reaper Man is a pun on Repo Man.
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's fun as well. There's overflowing with puns.
absolutely.
It's very
So
fun.
good. All right, so now on this next slide, Wendell muses on the life force of the city. We're going to kind of touch on this again, see if this helps us get any clearer image of what's going on with this book.
It's our last chance.
Yes, a city is alive. Supposing you were a great slow giant, like a counting pine, and looked down at a city. You'd see buildings grow. You'd see attackers driven off. You'd see fires put out. You'd see the city was alive, but you wouldn't see people because they'd move too fast. The life of a city, the thing that drives it, isn't some sort of mysterious force. The life of a city is people. He turned the pages absently, not really looking. So we have the cities, big sedentary creatures growing from one spot and hardly moving at all for thousands of years. They breed by sending people out to colonize new land. They themselves just lie there. They're alive, but only in the same way that a jellyfish is alive, or a fairly bright vegetable. After all, we call Ankh-Morpork the big wahoonie, and when you get big, slow-living things, you get small, fast things that eat them. Wendell Poons felt the brain cells firing. Connections were made. Thoughts gushed along new channels. Had he ever really thought properly when he was alive? He doubted it. He'd just been a lot of complicated reactions attached to a lot of nerve endings, without everything from idle rumination about the next meal to random distracting memories getting between him and real thought. It'd grow inside the city where it was warm and protected, and then it'd break out, outside the city, and build something. Not a real city, a false city that pulls the people, the life, out of the host. The word we're looking for here is predator.
Okay, so for some reason that didn't make sense to me before, but now it does,
Mm-hmm.
because now we've talked about it.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so a shopping mall is a predator of human life.
Yes, yes.
In Terry Goodkind. Why do I keep saying Terry Goodkind?
I don't know. That's really
Pratchett.
insulting. That's really
It is.
insulting.
Yeah, it's terrible.
To
No,
Pratchett.
because it's Terry. Terry's not a common name. Terry Pratchett's cosmology. Shopping malls are a predator that sets up shop near a city and then sucks the life out of the city.
Yeah.
That scans. That's consistent.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Cool. I like it a lot, and I think we got there without even the slide, which is cool, and it makes this land a lot more for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I somewhat ashamed to admit, like, when I read this the first time, I was just like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was like too. So.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't talk about this. You didn't pull the slide, but there's the very early part of this book when we're kind of traveling between the fruit flies that live for a day and then the trees that live for thousands of years, and just how the length of your life alters your perspective on the world. It is both very, very funny in the way Pratchett writes it, and also very fascinating to think about. Like, I just love the fruit fly that was like, back in my day,
Yeah.
this was all better.
Yeah.
There was a field here.
Yeah. There was a cow.
There's still a field. Oh yeah, well there was a cow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really fascinating. That just like how much perception and all that changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the pines where one of them is complaining and then it just disappears, and then
Yeah.
there was a shocked silence for 3 years or so.
Yeah, because they don't see it. They don't see individual moments because the time is so long that
Yeah.
that
I almost pulled that, except that the stuff with the trees and the flies is like 5 or 6 pages basically.
yeah. It's
But
it's-
I love that actually. I
Mhm.
really did.
I really like that the trees like were like the reason why humans are cutting us down is because they want to see how old we are. So they just started putting their ages on the bark,
Uh-huh.
and then the I forget like the novelty like shot like house number
Uh-huh.
industry like ate them alive because
Yeah. There are almost none left now.
I mean that the counting trees, right? That's what they're called. Yeah. That's really part of it too, though, because that's like how we destroy life for industry. This I don't know why it took me so long to recognize all the little bits and moments in the story where it's very as Sophie said earlier, it's very like skeptic of progress and skeptic of technological achievement and all these things.
Yeah, that's a good point that Sophie has pointed out, that Pratchett is fairly consistently Luddite, I believe he's been called in the chat.
Sure.
Anti-tech, anti-automation, pro-humans getting their hands dirty. Makes a lot of sense.
All right. So,
Okay.
is this yours or mine? I forgot.
I'm sorry. I got a little. No, it's
No, it's yours. It's yours. Yeah.
Are we on 14? I'm sorry.
Yes.
We're on 14. Okay. Yes. So this is the support group of undead encounters the newborn Mall City. Ludmilla risked removing her hands from her ears. It's horrible. What is it, Mr. Poons? Wendell tried to pull the remains of his hat over his ears. Don't know, he said. Could be music. If you'd never heard music before. There weren't notes. There were strung together noises that might have been intended to be notes, put together as one might draw a map of a country that one had never seen. It's coming from outside the city, said Ludmilla, where all the people are going. They can't like it, can they? I can't imagine they should. Why they should, said Wendell. It's just that you remember the trouble with the rats last year? The man who had a pipe, who said he had a pipe that played music only rats could hear? Yes, but that wasn't really true. It was all a fraud. It was just the amazing Maurice and his educated rodents. But supposing it could have been true, Wendell shook his head. Music to attract humans? Is that what you're getting at? But that can't be true. It's not attracting us. Quite the reverse, I assure you. But you're not human, exactly, said Ludmilla, and she stopped and went red in the face. Wendell patted her on the shoulder. Good point, was all he could think of to say. So this is another opportunity to talk about Ludmilla, and also this moment that we want to talk about, where he kind of draws Ludmilla and the wereman together.
Yeah, I mean, so this music is like the human music. Like, what? I didn't quite understand what the analog for that was.
I don't either.
Like,
I mean, at first I thought it was supposed to be like
it's
music,
just making fun of mall music.
yeah, like crappy mall music, but I was like, is it like, part of me was like, is it actually horribly cacophonous, or is it actually just crappy mall music that is offensive to these characters because they have taste? And I couldn't really tell what the intention of the gag was there. 567 says maybe it's car horns.
And,
I don't know.
Stelheck says advertising. I mean, like, it says, like, I don't know what I don't know what that's supposed to be. I mean, I think it. The noise of a big gathering of people. Interesting. Yeah, I guess
I
that
think
could be it.
I think there's a problem, which is that it's really great, and I appreciate it that Pratchett put so much faith in us as the reader, but it's a problem when we're not as smart as he is.
But yeah, I mean, this ties into everything we were saying. Like this is just the pull of mindless progress for progress's sake can be predatory, and once again we have to go with our Bob Dylan song. We have the outsiders, the agents of change, are people that are considered abnormal, are the ones that are immune to the thing that pulls in the masses.
Yeah.
And they are the only ones that can free us through this
Yeah.
from this.
I mean, they're basically the goth kids, right?
Yes. Oh my god.
I what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. People in the chat earlier were basically, I don't know if I was interpreting this right because I was parsing, but I think there was an implication that Pratchett also wrote the story of the Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents as a separate book. So that's cool. Yeah.
That's really cool. I want to read that because it sounds amazing.
Yeah, it does. It immediately sounds funny.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready for the final countdown of death v death?
We are. This is where I just kind of go nuts, and I'm like, we got to finish all these deaths, the death story. So, yeah.
All right. So in this one, Death is dueling New Death. The New Death raised his cowl. There was no face there. There was not even a skull. Smoke curled formlessly between the robe and a golden crown. Bildor raised himself on his elbows. A crown? His voice shook with rage. I never wore a crown. You never wanted to rule. The Death swung the scythe back. And then it dawned on the old Death and the New Death that the hissing of passing time had not, in fact, stopped. The New Death hesitated and took out the golden glass. It shook it. Bildor looked into the empty face under the crown. There was an expression of puzzlement there, even with no features actually to wear it. The expression hung in the air all by itself. He saw the crown turn. Miss Flitworth stood with her hands held a foot apart and her eyes closed. Between her hands, in the air in front of her, hovered the faint outline of a lifetimer, its sand pouring away in a torrent. The Deaths could just make out, on the glass, the spidery name, Renata Flitworth. The New Death's featureless expression became one of terminal puzzlement. It turned to Bildor. For you? But Bildor was already rising and unfolding like the wrath of kings. He reached behind him, growling, living on loaned time, and his hands closed around the harvest scythe. The crowned Death saw it coming and raised its own weapon, but there was very possibly nothing in the world that would stop the worn blade as it snarled through the air, rage and vengeance giving it an edge beyond any definition of sharpness. It passed through the metal without slowing. No crown, said Bildor, looking directly into the smoke. No crown, only the harvest. Powerful stuff there. Powerful stuff.
Indeed. Yes, in a sense, there's no point to pulling slides that are just awesome for a book club because there's not much to talk about. But in another sense, I had to.
Yeah.
So.
I think we kind of already touched on this, but the differences between the Deaths are very important, and this obsession with the crown. This Death has not only it's so interesting that the reason, quote unquote, that they've removed Death is because he took on too much of a personality. And we see here that, of course, this Death still also has a personality.
Yeah.
And he's kinged himself. He's crowned himself king. He's king of Death.
He wants to rule, and he wants to put himself as something like central to existence, possibly.
Yeah.
This reality maybe is in his mind ruled by death. Clearly, everything dies. Death is my domain, and I don't know. It's interesting to me that it kind of seems like how I imagine a Nazgul to look. I don't know if that's an intentional nod or if it's just a coincidence.
I like it, though. I like it. And I love that last line, no crown, only the harvest, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I am not meant to rule. I am not meant to be king. I am not meant to be this overbearing presence on life. I am just meant to harvest souls when their time comes. That is my purpose. That is supposed to be your purpose.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. The audiobook reader gave the new Death kind of like a dumb, dopey voice,
Oh, I
which
like that.
which is actually, yeah, it worked actually. Like it didn't. I don't think it interfered with the drama of this moment at all. Yeah, and of course the Death voice is a good voice. It was a really good. It was a really good. I didn't comment on the audiobook yet. It was a really good audiobook reading, but I will just say that I just think that the jokes would be funnier if you were reading them, because then you could pause in your reading to chuckle, whereas when you're listening, he just keeps right on reading and kind of flushes it out of your head, you know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I have to say that while reading this book, there were multiple times where I laughed out loud, stopped, and then just read the passage that I was laughing at to my wife. So that is something
yeah,
you really couldn't get. Although maybe she would have just been listening along. I don't know.
yeah. No, I think I mean I'm not really complaining. It was still a good experience, but I think this is one case where the text, the reading with your human eyeballs would be better. So yeah.
Miss Evildoom says, death is shaped by how people picture death. Is new death a reflection of a change in how people picture death? Interesting.
Maybe, but old Death kills him, so
Yeah. So they lose, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but let's pretend that's true. Let's pretend that, yes, it is. Like, why would, in fitting in with our, progress for progress sake and the cold technological advancement, what would death being a ruler of that say about our themes? I'm not sure.
Maybe it's that as you come to become a society that kind of lives in terror of death rather than having it just be a part of your existence, um, you in a sense give it a crown. You give it some kind of tyranny over your life, because instead of it just being, every year you've got to do the harvest, death is part of the cycle of every year. Now death is this terrible, terrible, distant thing. Much like a Nazgul, it's uh, a tyrant.
Yeah.
I don't know. Once again, it's fun to riff on these things, but I have so little confidence in anything I'm saying.
I like that. Stelhex is saying we would want to overthrow a tyrant. What is that quote? It's a quote from something else we read, and I can't think of it now.
I don't remember.
Um, I like that. This idea that like death is a part of life. It should go hand in hand with life in some ways, and people have removed it from that and given it power and rule over our lives in a way. Yeah.
Thanks for the question, Miss Evil Doom. That was very
I like that.
interesting to explore.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Read the sad part, but also the happy part.
All right. Here is Death returning to Miss Flitworth for one last dance. I have brought you some flowers. She stared at the dry, dead stems. Also some chocolate assortments, the sort ladies like. She stared at the black box. Also, here is a diamond to be friends with you. It caught the last rays of the setting sun. Miss Flitworth finally found her voice. Bildor, what are you thinking of? I have come to take you away from all this. You have? Where to? Death hadn't thought this far. Where would you like? I ain't proposing to go anywhere tonight except the dance, said Miss Flitworth firmly. Death hadn't planned for this either. What is this dance? Harvest dance. You know, it's tradition when the harvest is in. It's a sort of celebration, and like a Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving to who? Dunno. No one in particular, I reckon. Just general thankfulness, I suppose. I had planned to show you marvels, fine cities, anything you wanted. Anything? Yes. Then we're going to the dance, Bildor. I always go every year. They rely on me. You know how it is. Yes, Miss Flitworth. He reached out and took her hand. Love it.
It's wonderful. And again, we go back to this idea of simplicity, of the simpler life. Like, you don't need marvels, fine cities, anything. Mm-hmm. You don't need giant diamonds. I love that the flowers died. That's perfect.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he sort of does everything wrong, but it's the thought that counts.
Didn't he eat some of the chocolates too?
I think so. don't
It's
remember.
amazing. And all
I
she wants is the simple thing, just to
Yeah,
go to that
go to
harvest dance.
the harvest dance, which you could say is a celebration of death,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's
because it's the harvest
the
is equated
harvest.
with
Yeah.
death, and
Yes.
it's the end. It's the end of the year. It's the fall. I assume the fall. Yeah,
Yes.
it's the Thanksgiving celebration,
Mm-hmm.
which is the end of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it is a kind of celebration of death. So I like this idea of death has been, the concept of death has been played around. And I think we're being encouraged to, instead of considering death as just, the 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 nightmare that rides on a pale horse, it's Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Halloween season. It's it's the thing that makes way for the life of the next cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not good, right? Like
Hmm.
I don't think, and I think this is kind of where if you you took your bold stance earlier in the show that death is bad, and I would not say that Pratchett disagrees with you, but in a world in which it is an inevitability, like we have to, we can't make it our ruler, right? We have to have it be a thing that when the time comes we freely take its hand and
Yeah,
recognize the necessity of it in many ways.
yeah, accept it. And I mean, it also becomes a celebration of her life because,
Yes, yes.
it becomes her last dance. It's her swan song, and it's it's a beautiful moment. Obviously I couldn't catch the entire sequence
Mm-hmm.
where she goes and dances the night away. Um,
It's
I
beautiful.
it's kind of a stupid question here. Like, is she like corporeally at that dance, or does she just think she is?
I don't know. I kind of liked it better as she just kind of thinks she is. That like
I wasn't sure. I
she
wasn't
just
sure because it seemed like people were reacting to their presence. So I but it made but like she was dead from the moment she left the house was what death tells her basically.
yeah
So
yeah.
so I wasn't sure.
I don't know. I don't want to overthink it. I just
It
like it was a beautiful final night that she had,
Yeah,
dead or
it's the
alive.
it's the kind of thing where I don't actually care.
Yeah. Right. Right.
um, yeah. All right. And then if we're done with that,
Mm-hmm.
we usually pull the last lines of a book. So that is how we end. Um, actually, that's your slide, but
Oh,
I can.
did I read yours?
We've
No, I
been.
didn't. Okay.
Yeah,
You labeled them wrong.
and
Kind of.
we switched. We messed up at one point, and we've been alternating for the last like 8 slides. So whatever.
I knew I'd missed someone. The Death of Rats nodded. Squeak. Death shook his head. No, I can't let you remain, he said. It's not as though I'm running a franchise or something. Squeak? Are you the only one left? The Death of Rats opened a tiny skeletal hand. The tiny Death of Fleas stood up, looking embarrassed, but hopeful. No, this shall not be. I am implacable. I am Death. Alone. He looked at the Death of Rats. He remembered Asriel in his tower of loneliness. Alone. The Death of Rats looked back at him. Squeak? Picture a tall, dark figure surrounded by cornfields. No, you can't ride a cat. Whoever heard of a death of rats riding a cat? The Death of Rats would ride some kind of dog. Picture more fields, a great horizon spanning networks of fields, rolling in gentle waves. Don't ask me how I know. Some kind of terrier, maybe. Field of corn, alive, whispering in the breeze. Right, and the Death of Fleas can ride it too. That way you kill two birds with one stone. Awaiting the clock of the seasons. Metaphorically. And at the end of all stories, Asriel, who knew the secret, thought, I remember when all this will be again. The end.
Love it. Delightful. Yeah, 567 makes the point that he gave her some time, so I
Yeah.
think she was actually able to be at the. I mean, if we're gonna get all like nitty gritty and plotty, like, is it the case that the hourglass just said that death had to die, and so he killed the other death, and so death died, or am I being overly analytical there? Because I don't know.
Mm.
But again, I sort of doubt that he thinks about his stories that way. But that did occur to me in that moment where it was like, well, a death did die at about the exact moment where his hourglass ran out. So
Yeah.
Um,
I,
anyway,
I think this is the perfect ending of this book, and
yeah.
you know, reading it aloud really nailed that for me. Where it's this hilarious conversation between a skeleton man and a skeleton rat discussing
Uh-huh.
the appropriate thing for the death of rats to ride,
Hmm.
while mixed in with this incredibly important, like, emotional moment of like picturing fields and like this representation of life, this beautiful like field of corn whispering in the breeze, awaiting the inevitability, but living. This is what this book is. It's really funny stuff mixed in with this really powerful moments that I just adored.
Yeah, yeah. It's so fun, and of course, this is a powerful moment in a sense because I feel like the death at the beginning of this story would not have allowed the death of rats to remain separate.
Mm-hmm.
But he basically decides like, yeah, the natural order of things should be that death is one single thing, but it would be sad for me to destroy this independent being,
Yeah,
metaphorical though it is, and so and now he has a little friend, his little Death of Rats friend,
he's
which I
got
assume is
two
going to be like
friends.
an ongoing character. Yeah, it's true. Death of Fleas too. I do think it's funny that he suggested terrier because terriers are like bred to kill rats. So like the idea of a rat riding a terrier would be like a terrifying sight to rats.
Yeah, and he knew that. Don't
Yeah,
ask
of
him
course
how
he
he knew
did.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, don't ask me how. Yeah, yeah.
So some people are upset with you that you did not pull the full page yes as just a single slide when
Uh huh.
Asriel says yes to Death's demand or question or request rather.
Yeah, yeah. Should have. Sorry. Sorry about that.
And both Kirk and Miss Evildoom are talking about the story of the prisoner in the tower. We didn't really touch on that.
No. I mean, yes, it's a great metaphorical moment.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, that's the thing. There's always 100. I literally pulled, I think, like 35 slides, but we can only really cover in the range of 15, and so I deleted. I basically just picked the ones where I was like, I feel like we'll definitely have something to say about this, or like this touches on something that I feel like I don't really understand, and so I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
explore it. Um,
It's a
yeah,
tough job pulling slides. It's not easy.
it's true.
This is why when we first started, I pulled like 25, and I've slowly
Yeah,
pared back as we've done this more because it's
yeah.
like you don't want it to go on too long, but you want to say everything about everything.
Yeah,
But
right. Because otherwise we'd go on for like 3 hours. But yeah, what you want to pull few enough that you can afford to meander and explore each concept, and not have to rush through the
how
slides.
dare we don't meander?
I mean, I meander a little bit.
Um,
You though, you're always on the ball, Scott.
that's bullshit. Kirk asks, "Did we read physical copies?" I read the ebook, and they just made it a separate ebook page. Like my ebook, like I guess some people scroll with the ebook. I still do pages on my Kindle, and it's just a big yes on its own page. So it didn't ruin it. I could totally see what you mean that they would ruin the impact. I do think I would have enjoyed it a little more if I got to actually physically turn a page and see that, but it was still its own page, so I think it still worked on me. But for you, Matt, I think on audiobook, that's just
No,
someone saying yes out loud.
there's just someone saying yes in a godly voice. Um,
David says, in the honor of the birth of my son, the next book club will be Insomnia. No, we're covering that on Kingslingers one day. Although I don't know. I've been trying. I'm very tired right now. Like halfway through this thing, it hit me. I was like, oh my god, I'm so tired.
yeah, but it's okay. You channel that tiredness into that special mental space where you make bizarre connections you wouldn't have otherwise made.
But while also fumbling over words that I should be able to say out loud with no problem at all.
Well, I'm doing that too, and I don't currently have any babies, so um,
I like what 567 says. This book is not plot heavy. It's not. It's not plot heavy. Like
yeah,
plot wise, not a lot happens, but they do drive its theming home pretty well.
yeah. I mean, I felt like this might be a really hard book to talk about because um, it is. it is very, very different from most of the stories we talk about on book club. It is just
Mm-hmm.
very different from most books, really. It's not
Yeah.
trying to be that kind of object, that kind of novel. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's um yes, it has characters, certainly has theme. I mean, I think one thing you could say is like the degree to which Pratchett lets theme drive everything about the story is actually, you know, to the degree that it breaks down any sort of sense of like seriousness or um I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't sound like I'm criticizing because I'm not intending to, but like he's like, I don't care if it makes sense
Uh-huh.
at all. I only care if the theme comes across.
Yeah.
That's my feeling, and it's like because it's so entertaining, because it's so funny, because the characters are so strong, and the moments of heart are so strong, you don't care that it doesn't really make a ton of sense either, and it makes
Yeah.
sense in the ways it needs to make sense, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, I mean, again, I've only read this one book, but I feel like Discworld is just a place in which anything is possible at any moment, and so it
Uh-huh.
doesn't matter if there's logical consistencies of the world building. It's just not. It just doesn't seem like what he's interested in at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Sophie. Appreciate that. So, Matt, I got a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Are you going to read more Discworld after this book?
I, there's a good chance of it. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I like that it's a nice short read.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I think it would help me to do so if somebody had, their top, top five list.
Yeah, that
Or
was going to be the question I was about to ask the audience after the question I asked you, which was,
yeah, yeah.
if we're going to read more Discworld, what should we read? If we have 5 books, we only have time for 5 Discworld books. Which should they be? Not an
Yeah.
easy question to answer, I think.
Yeah. Because I mean that's honestly like w- the reason why I don't read more of the like sequels and other books in series is because there's so much stuff to read out there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I like to explore. There's a few. There's been a few suggestions in the chat. There's
I like it
Small
bipolar and
God.
says several people are typing.
Yeah, it's good. Small God, The Amazing Maurice. Um, I assume more are coming. The guard books, the
Yeah,
guards books.
Guards was one I've not read, but like it caught my eye when I was at a bookstore years ago because it's such a title.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think I read the first Pratchett book when I was like too young to get it. Um, and I just kind of was like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to process this. But I, I sort of regret that actually.
No, it's never too late, Matt. Here we are. Here we are
Yeah,
now,
it's true.
years
No,
later.
no, it's the end, Scott. Um, I Shall Wear Midnight is apparently a, one of them. We Free Men, Night Watch,
Okay, this is more than 5, and
Going
then
Postal, Monstrous Regiment, The Truth, Thief of Time. Okay,
and
all
then
right,
Sophie just says all of them. So that
yeah,
just feels like cheating.
yeah,
That helps though. That helps. I have some places to start.
all right.
Thank you so much. And are we ready to talk about next month?
Yeah, I think so.
So next month, where I'm hopefully a little bit more rested, there was no poll this week because next month is another one of our semi-annual We Pick'ems, and I picked one that was on the poll for the last 2 months but lost because I really wanted to read it. So next month we are going to be reading Peter Straub's Ghost Story. This is a book I've wanted to read for a long, 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 long time, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to do so. So that's what we're going to read. I'm also, Matt, I'm kind of cheating here. It's not that I'm cheating, but we're going to be reading Peter Straub books for season 2 of Kingslingers because we're going to be reading The Talisman and Black House, which are 2 books that were written by Stephen King and Peter Straub together. And I feel like before I read those books or before I study those books as part of that show, I need to read more Straub on my own so I can like get a better grasp and understanding of which parts of those books are the King parts and which parts are the Straub parts. I think I'm pretty good at picking out King stuff, but I haven't read enough Peter Straub to know. So I'm also like making everyone do my homework with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great. This is the greatest crossover event in book club history. And yeah, maybe we should somehow cross pollinate this with Kingslingers. I don't know. I don't know what that means exactly, but um,
And
yeah,
we'll
I'm
surely
super
talk
excited
about it
about
with
this.
them. Yeah.
This is a book that Stephen King also likes specifically, right?
Oh yeah, he loves Peter Straub, and he calls Ghost Story one of the best, like the best horror novels of the 20th century. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, that is great. I feel like I haven't actually read enough horror, and I'm excited to read this. I'm glad you chose this. Like this is one that I also wanted to read, and so
Hmm.
it's always nice when your we pick 'em is something that I wanted to pick anyway. So
Yeah. Yeah.
very excited about this.
Yeah. So I hope we like. Here's the thing: sci-fi, fantasy, that stuff wins these polls a lot, right? And so
Uh-huh.
when it comes time for us to pick stuff, I always kind of try to go for stuff that's a little bit different. It's a little
Yeah.
bit stuff that I think people would really like, but doesn't tend to be the most popular poll winning choice. So I think this is one of them because it's been on the poll a couple times, never won. It just feels like it fits that. So hope everyone gives this book a shot, and I hope we all enjoy it and have a lot to say about it when we meet up next month.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
People, as we can close, people are still recommending Discworld books. I
Uh,
should have known what I was getting myself into when I opened this question up to people. But that's actually that excites me because like it means people are passionate and it's worth checking out these books if people are so passionate about them.
yep.
All right, so next month, Friday, April 30th at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, we will meet to talk about Peter Straub's Ghost Story. And if you have any thoughts on this book or you want us to kind of think about it in a certain way or tailor the discussion around a certain thing, you can always reach out to us before the episode at doofmedia@gmail.com or on Twitter @doofmedia. Just say, hey, when you're thinking about Ghost Story, maybe focus on this part right here. It really helps us when we get those.
Yeah. Yeah. We appreciate that. If you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia. Um, at any available patron level, you'll get access to the vote for the books we talk about, as well as a bunch of other exclusive features. So go check that out.
That is right. Thank you. Thank you so much to everyone who tuned in live. This was so fun. I'm sorry I was a little bit more tired than normal, but hopefully my body will have found a way to survive with this level of sleep by this time next month, so I'll be a little bit better. But thank you so much for hanging out. It's so fun to see all y'all. I basically took this entire week off from podcasting, but I still wanted to do the book club because I love it so much and I love hanging out with y'all. So it was really great that y'all attended. I really enjoyed this, and I guess we'll see you next month. Okay. I am so tired. I need to go. I would love to hang out and chat with people for a little bit more, but I need to go check out my kid and then hopefully get 2 hours of sleep before he wakes up again.
Yes, please do that. Take care of little baby. Um, give him snuggles for all of us, everyone here.
I will. He's such a good baby. It's been wonderful. I have no complaints at all.
I want to see your baby, Scott. Scott,
I
go wake up the baby and bring him onto the screen.
I thought about doing that and then I said, that's a terrible idea.
That is the worst idea. That's the worst thing I've ever said to you. All right.
Thank
Good
you,
night,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night. Good night. Hope to see you next month. Bye.